Senate will come to order. The senators will please take their seats. The senators and all in attendance will please stand and be led in prayer by the Honorable Jen A. Kiggins, 7th Senatorial District. Following the prayer, everyone will remain standing and be led in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America by Bladen Finch, Senate Page Program Director, the Senate Clerk's Office.
Let us bow our heads. Dear God, we thank you for bringing us together this day as we begin a new day of service in the General Assembly of our Commonwealth. We thank you for allowing us to be together today, and we ask for daily guidance to obey your laws, to do your will, and to serve your people with humility and grace. As we continue this special session of the General Assembly, we do so with great hope. We celebrate the democracy that we are blessed to practice in this great country and ask for your wisdom when debating the difficulties of our Commonwealth and communities. As we consider legislation that is contentious and unresolved, let us approach these times with a mindset of clarity and peace. We know that you are here to help and want to guide us through as we walk in your footsteps. We pray especially for our military members who serve and defend our great nation voluntarily and ask for your blessing upon their families. We pray also for those who serve our communities through law enforcement, fire, medical, and emergency services, and ask for their continued safety throughout the year. During this global pandemic, we pray for those people and families affected by COVID-19, and we remember those who are sick and isolated due to the coronavirus. Please guide and protect us all as we serve in public office through this special legislative session, and may all that is done be for your greater honor and glory, now and forever. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk will call the roll. All those in attendance will please record their vote aye. Clerk will close the roll.
You have a quorum, Mr. President. Senate Journal for Wednesday, August the 26th, 2020.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Senator from Augusta, Senator Hanger, moves that the reading of the journal be waived. All in favor of waiving the reading of the journal will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 25, noes 5.
Ayes 25, noes 5. The reading of the journal is waived. The clerk will report any communication from the House of Delegates.
We do not have any, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The clerk will report any communication from the governor.
We do not have any, sir.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Resolutions, petitions, and bills are now in order. Is there any other business to come in the morning hour?
Mr. President.
Senator from Hanover, Senator McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, could the journal reflect that the gentleman from Rockingham is away on pressing personal business?
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the journal also reflect a leave of absence for Senator Reeves and Senator Vogel as they are still away on pressing personal business?
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman. Senator, I think your mic may not be on. That's
I would
on.
ask that the journal reflect a leave of absence for Senator Stewart, who is away on personal business.
Thank the Senator. The journal will so reflect. Is there any other business to come before the Senate in the morning hour? Seeing none, the clerk will call the calendar.
Senate calendar for Thursday, August the 27th, 2020. Uncontested calendar, Senate bills on third reading.
Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Sasslaw.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate bills on third reading on the uncontested calendar, pages 1 through 4, that's Senate Bill 5068 through 5101, be placed on their final passage in a block. Any senator desiring to move a bill from the block, please do so after the clerk has read the number of the bill.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the Senate bills on the uncontested calendar, third reading, pages 1 through 4, Senate Bill 5068 through Senate Bill 5101, be placed upon their final passage in the block, with the understanding that any senator desiring a bill be removed from the block will do so after the clerk has read the number of the bill. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The bills are before us in the block. The clerk will read the number of the bills.
Senate Bill 5068. Senate Bill 5080. Senate Bill 5081. Senate Bill 5083. Senate Bill 5088. Senate Bill 5090. Senate Bill 5100. Senate Bill 5101.
Question is, shall the bills in the block pass? All in favor of passage of the bills will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senator desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 34, noes 0.
Ayes 34, no 0. The bills in the block pass.
Regular calendar, Senate bill on third reading, Senate Bill 5045, a bill relating to criminal cases, fiscal impact statements.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Serville.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill pass and speaking to the bill.
Thank the Senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully this one won't take 2 hours today. But this is a very short little bill which creates a pilot program. In the 11 years I've been here, one of the things I've noticed is that when we have bills that go through that that relate to the criminal justice system, that we often get very one-sided information about the policies we're trying to enact. And I think that that one-sided information tends to color the thinking and the debate. And we tend to get what things cost, but we never get, if there's savings, what the savings are. And so this legislation basically directs DPB to prepare a fiscal impact statement that shows not only what things cost, but also how much money will be saved if, for example, a crime is repealed or a punishment is lowered, or some policy change would result in less incarceration. DPB said that this isn't the type of analysis they normally do, and there's some expertise involved, which they're not sure they have. It would also require more staffing, and so the administration felt like they wanted to put their toe in the water but not go whole hog on this. So the bill is drafted right now basically has a reenactment clause which requires it to be enacted again next year, and in the meantime directs DPB to prepare a couple of these statements, two at the direction of the Chair of Senate Finance and two at the direction of House Appropriations for us to consider for the 2022 session, so we can sort of see how it works and see if this is a policy that we want to enact more fully. But that's basically what the bill does, and hope it to be the pleasure of the body to pass it so we can get better information as we make our decisions.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose, Senator from Hanover, Senator McDougall rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to speak briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, as my good friend, the gentleman formerly from JMU, articulated, additional information I think is always helpful when we're making our decisions. But Mr. President, this bill only gives another small chunk of what that information is and does not go into the impacts on the victims, impacts to the communities, and what that costs. Mr. President, if you just take one example of a mandatory minimum, which is of a very serious crime like child rape, there's no ability through what we're doing to allocate the cost to the community, allocate the cost to that victim, to the family of that victim. And some of those costs are very tangible in not only medical costs, but also continued counseling, assistance, and psychological help as it goes forward. So, Mr. President, if we want to see the whole picture, we need to look at the whole picture and that includes the cost to victims of crimes, particularly victims of very serious crimes, if we're going to reduce the penalties.
Thank the senator. Do any senators other than the patron wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5045? For what purpose, Senator from Henrico, Senator Dunham, rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just rise to make a point because
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very authentically, I want to see criminal justice reform in Virginia. And as bills go through, we often see bits and pieces of information, as alluded to by the two prior speakers. And I want to point out, if the goal of this bill, as articulated, is really to decrease the net periods of imprisonment, that we have an opportunity to affect that much more substantially in other actions we have the power to take in this special session. And one of the most important ones is diversion. We've heard a lot about diversion. Diversion is making sure that people don't go to jail if it's not the appropriate way to resolve a problem. And that might be because of mental health issues. That might be because of certain developmental delays or other issues that they have. 23,000 people, when we look at the number of people in Virginia that are sitting in jail, 23,000 people are sitting in jail because in pretrial instead of being managed at home. And we know that one of the reasons that's the case in Virginia is because 33 of our localities cannot afford the cost of pretrial services, which significantly reduce costs if we want transparency on money, and significantly reduce the injustice of individuals sitting in jail, which makes them lose their jobs. We've corrected the issue with fines on losing their driver's licenses, but they're still losing their jobs. And Mr. President, if we authentically want to make a difference in the lives of Virginians and alter the criminal justice in Virginia and who's in jail that shouldn't be, we need to have some serious conversation about things that will make substantive change. Thank you, Mr. President. I thought it was important we point out the bigger picture.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from Northwestern Fairfax, Senator Boysko, rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to point out a real application of how this could have changed a piece of legislation this past year. During the 2020 session, the senator from Western Fairfax County had a bill. It was SB 242, which would have made carnal knowledge of an inmate or a parolee a violation. It passed through this body with strong support on a bipartisan basis. However, when it went over to the House, it ended up not being successful on fiscal manner. There was no reason that we should not have been able to look at what the positives were instead of only looking at what the cost to the Commonwealth was. And I think that's one specific example of exactly why we need this bill that the senator from Eastern Fairfax is proposing, and I move that we pass the bill.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, senator from Roanoke County, Senator Suderline, rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to speak most briefly to the amendment that was put on the reenactment clause. This is the sort of thing that, the Dave Suderline of 10 years ago is telling myself, you have to say something. It would drive me crazy that we would pass a bill out of this chamber at the beginning of a session, as this is, with a reenactment clause on it already. I don't know why we would do that. I understand sometimes we put reenactment clauses on at the very end of a session because we just can't find a way through the negotiations, and it's agreed that we want to do that. But I just felt compelled to say something because I hope we don't start going down this path where over and over again we start seeing bills leaving our chamber originally with reenactment clauses.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe, rise.
Mr. President, I stand to speak in favor of the bill.
Senator, the floor.
This is a concept I've been wrestling with for over a year now. I think our system is failing us because it only deals with costs and it does not deal with benefits. If we are to make changes and we have legislation that will save us money, we should know that. We should have some way to do it. Now, I started researching this and working with J. Lark and others and was told this is very hard to do. Don't put in a bill like that. So I didn't, although I still think it's a good idea. But I like what this bill does. It is extremely limited. It is an opportunity for us to explore whether looking into benefits is something that we can do. And I would urge everyone to vote for it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill again.
Senator's the floor.
Thank you. So just a couple things really quick. First of all, on the reenactment clause piece, we were trying to get this done quickly. I thought that was the easiest way to make this a pilot. In theory, we could have drafted this as a Section 1 bill and just done it that way. But I appreciate the style comments by the senator from Roanoke County. But yeah, there's two real examples to me which really stuck out that I've noticed just last session, which sort of made my head spin. Number one is I put in legislation last year to eliminate capital punishment in Virginia. And the fiscal impact statement that came back said that it would cost taxpayers $72,000 to abolish capital punishment because we would have to house 2 people for 2 years instead of killing them. And the Capitol Defender Service costs taxpayers $3.928 million a year. So the bill actually had almost an $8 million net positive impact, but the only piece of paper that we got in the process said it was going to cost us $72,000. That just made my head spin, right? That's the kind of information we're getting. Another one, for example, the senior senator from Richmond, city of Richmond, she put in legislation, which we passed, to change the misdemeanor felony threshold. And you look at the fiscal impact statement, it said, we don't know how much this is going to save us. But clearly, defelonizing thousands of cases a year is going to save our system tons and tons and tons of time. And while I appreciate trying to figure out the costs and the savings of everything is hard, at least the costs within the budget process, this cost to taxpayers that we have to write checks for in the process as part of this is something that we ought to have better information about. And that's why we're doing the bill. So I hope we can pass it.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, Senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards, rise.
Mr. President, this bill is long overdue. I'm appalled that they don't do it already. I mean, it's ridiculous. If you read, as the senator from Eastern Fairfax commented, you would assume, and as a senator from Northern Fairfax commented too, you would assume this would already be being done, saving money. They don't compute saving money? Are you kidding? What's wrong with that? I would have assumed it was being done anyway. Of course, it's not, which makes no sense at all. This is long overdue.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding Senate Bill 5045? Seeing none, the question is, shall Senate Bill 5045 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk, close the roll.
Ayes 21, noes 13, Rule 36-1.
Ayes 21, noes 13, Rule 36-1. Senate Bill 5045 passes.
Uncontested calendar, Senate bills on second reading.
Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I move that all Senate bills on second reading on the uncontested calendar on pages 6 through 7. That's Senate Bill 5047 through 5096 be advanced to their engrossment in third reading, the block after the adoption of any amendments thereto. Any senator desiring to move a bill from the block, please do so after the clerk has read the number of the bill.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall all the Senate bills on second reading on the uncontested calendar on pages 6 through 7, Senate Bill 5047 through Senate Bill 5096, be engrossed in advance to their third reading in the block after the adoption of any amendments thereto, and that any senator desiring a bill be removed from the block will do so after the clerk has read the number of the bill. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will read the number of the bills.
Senate Bill 5047, reported from the Committee on Rules. Senate Bill 5095, reported from the Committee on Education and Health with a substitute. We have one floor substitute. A second floor substitute has just been filed and is being copied, so we do not have that yet. If the
Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, if we could take that by temporarily to get that additional substitute.
Thank the senator. Without objection, Senate Bill 5095 will be removed from the block.
Senate Bill 5041, reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with amendments.
Mr. President.
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Mr. President, I ask that the committee amendments be agreed to.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee amendments be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendments are agreed to.
Senate Bill 5052, reported from the Committee on the Judiciary, and there are 3 floor amendments.
Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The patron of the bill has asked if I would handle the matter today. I would respectfully move we waive the reading of the proposed amendments.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor amendments be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendments is waived. Senator from James City County, Senator Norman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a bill that came out with a unanimous recommendation from the committee. The amendments are fairly simple. Is what it does, and it was an oversight and draftsmanship, is that we did not want to restrict the bill to local law enforcement agencies. It was intended to include state law enforcement agencies as well, and that is what the 3 amendments do on lines 21, 26. I respectfully ask that the floor amendments be agreed to, sir.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the floor amendments be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor amendments are agreed to.
Senate Bill 5096, reported from the Committee on Rehabilitation and Social Services.
Question is, shall the Senate bills be engrossed in advance to their third reading? That is all bills except for Senate Bill 5095. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bills are engrossed in advance to their third reading.
Regular calendar, Senate bills on second reading. Senate Bill 5003, a bill relating to the Commission on Civil Rights and Policing established report, reported from the Committee on Rules, and there are 4 floor amendments.
Mr. President.
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Can that bill go by for the day?
I don't think he opposes my amendment.
He's not here. So, Mr. President, I'm carrying some of his stuff today. This is not one that he gave me to do. If it could go by for the day so I can talk with the patron and determine what's up.
I don't think he opposes the amendment. I would simply ask if we could pass
Sorry, Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Peterson.
I would simply answer the gentleman. These are friendly amendments. I don't think there was any objection by the patron.
Mr. President.
Senator from Hanover, Senator McDougal.
Gentleman from Fairfax yield for a question.
Senator Yield.
I will happily yield.
Senator Yields, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I ask the gentleman, do the amendments you proposed continue to make the representation between the House and Senate as far as membership equal, but reduce that number by 1?
Yes.
Further question?
So, Mr. President, is that the sum and substance of the amendments, even though there are multiple places in the bill?
Senator has the floor.
I would answer the gentleman. My amendment simply reduced by 1 the senator and House member in the commission, and then would have minority members or members of 2 minority groups that would be added to the commission. These are friendly amendments.
Further question?
I don't care.
Okay. Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Mr. President, I ask that this go by for the day.
That's fine.
Without objection, Senate Bill 5003 will go by for the day.
Senate Bill 5042, a bill relating to the State Board of Health Public Health Emergency, patient visitation, notice to family emergency.
We're on 5025.
Sorry. I went by for the day on the wrong bill. Senate Bill 5025, a bill relating to Board and Commissioner of Health Emergency Orders and Regulations duration, reported from the Committee on Education and Health.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, the clerk was clairvoyant. I did want that bill to go by for the day.
She always is. Thank the Senator. Without objection, Senate Bill 5025 will go by for the day.
Senate Bill 5042, a bill relating to State Board of Health Public Health Emergency, patient visitation, notice to family emergency, reported from the Committee on Education and Health, and there are 2 floor amendments and a floor substitute.
And Mr. President, I'd like to waive the reading of the amendments. Which, John.
Before we get to the floor subs, the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, we have 2 floor amendments.
Mr. President, I ask that my amendments be withdrawn.
Without objection, the floor amendments will be withdrawn. Thank the Senator. The junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Kiggins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I request to waive the reading of the substitute, which should be on everyone's desk.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor substitute be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor substitute is waived. The junior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Kiggins.
And Mr. President, just speaking briefly to the floor substitute.
Senator's the floor.
Thank you. We worked very hard since last weekend, since this bill was heard in committee, just with the stakeholders and the Virginia Healthcare Association to come to an agreement. There was just some dispute about how much the authority the facilities would have to actually implement and make develop the protocol for the visitation. This is the bill that requires a facility to have a visitation policy in place. It can either be done safely virtually or in person, following CDC guidelines, following CMS directives. So we added that line. The differences between the original bill and the substitute were that it's no longer just for a global pandemic, it's now COVID-19 specific. So we added that in the first line. It lets the facilities establish the protocol, again, consistent with CDC guidelines and CMS guidelines, and it allows for interactive audio, which is basically Zoom without video or video technology for virtual visits or socially distant in person, as the facility can do safely. It also changes the frequency of time for the visitation from the original bill had said once a week. We now have it saying once every 10 days. So again, the stakeholders are on board. The Virginia Healthcare Association is supportive of the bill. There's been no further opposition. There continues to be an emergency clause which states the regulations must be promulgated within 280 days of enactment. So I request that we adopt the substitute.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor substitute? Seeing none, the question is, shall the floor substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor substitute is adopted. Junior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator Kiggins.
Mr. President, I request we engross in advance Senate Bill 5042.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall Senate Bill 5042 be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5013, a bill relating to possession of marijuana, prepaid penalty, reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with a substitute.
Mr. President,
Senator from Alexandria, Senator Evan.
I move the committee substitute.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is adopted. Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
I now move that it be engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5029, a bill relating to issuing citations, possession of marijuana, and certain traffic infractions. Reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with a substitute.
Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the substitute be agreed to.
Thank the senator. Question is, shall the
Mr.
committee...
President? Servo.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servo.
Sorry, could this bill go by temporarily so I could talk to the patron really quick?
Without objection?
Without objection.
Without objection, Senate Bill 5029 will go by temporarily.
Senate Bill 5033, a bill relating to court authority in criminal cases, prosecutional discretion to dispose of a criminal case. Reported from the Committee on the Judiciary with a substitute.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee substitute.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is adopted. Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5050, a bill relating to parole, notice, and certification, monthly reports, discretionary early consideration. Reported from the Committee on Rehabilitation and Social Services with amendments.
Mr. President.
Senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that the committee amendments to Senate Bill 5050 be agreed to.
Mr. President.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax, Senator Servo.
I'm sorry, with apologies to the putative patron, I'd ask that this bill go by for the day.
Mr. President,
Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
I guess I would reinforce the motion that the committee amendments be adopted and then ask that it go by for the day.
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
We're going to wait until the patron's here.
Is there any objection to the bill going by for the day? All right. Without objection, Senate Bill 5050 will go by for the day.
Senate Bill 5106, a bill relating to local land use approvals, extension of approvals to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Reported from the Committee on Local Government with a substitute.
Senator from Accomack, Senator Lewis.
Mr. President, move adoption of the committee substitute.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is adopted. Senator from Accomack, Senator Lewis.
Mr. President, move the bill be engrossed and advanced on to its third reading.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its third reading.
Senate Bill 5120, a bill relating to the General Appropriation Act, appropriation of funds for the Department of Elections. Reported from the Committee on Finance and Appropriations with a substitute. There is a floor substitute. There is an amendment, floor amendment to the floor substitute. There is another floor amendment to the committee substitute, another floor amendment to the floor substitute, and a floor amendment to the finance substitute.
And a partridge in a pear tree. All right. Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
I've been here a long time, and I think that's a record. Okay, I'd like to recommend that we reject the floor substitute, but I move that we accept it.
It's a committee substitute. With the recommendation that the committee substitute be rejected, the question is, shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Noes have it. The committee substitute is rejected. Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
Thank you. I move that we waive the reading of the floor substitute.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor substitute be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor substitute is waived. Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move now that we agree to the floor substitute. And just for everyone's information, this is a purely technical change. It's not even in the policy part of the bill. It changes up at the top the appropriations number, and DPB requested it, so it'll go with their systems. So with that, I move we accept it.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise? Oh, okay. No worries. For what purpose, Senator from Alexandria, Senator Eben, rise? You're okay too? For what purpose, Senator from Arlington, Senator Favola, rise? Okay. I think that clears everyone. All right. The question is, shall the floor substitute be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor substitute is agreed to.
Then we have Senator Deeds' floor amendment to the floor substitute.
Senator from Bath, Senator Deeds.
Mr. President, I move that the reading of the floor amendment be waived.
Thank the senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor amendment be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendment is waived. Senator from Bath, Senator Deeds.
Mr. Chair, much of the discussion in committee was about the requirement of security for the drop-off boxes. Drop-off boxes are used in 30 states, and the State Department of Elections is tasked under this bill with developing standards for security and other use of the drop boxes. That language is contained on lines 49 and 50 of the substitute. What this floor amendment simply does is requires the Board of Elections, the Department of Elections, to submit those standards that they develop to this General Assembly within 30 days of the enactment of this legislation, and I move its passage.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, Senator from James City County, Senator Norman, rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the gentleman from Bath yield for a question, please?
Senator Yield.
Most certainly.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is, and it's a practical question, has anyone explored whether the availability of these drop boxes is going to be able to be delivered in time for the election?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. Chair, this is an idea that's been under consideration for a considerable period of time. I don't know the exact answer to that. I don't know but I know this is something the State Board or the Department of Elections has been working on, thinking about for a while, and I expect that they have been.
I thank the gentleman.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor amendment? Seeing none, question is, shall the floor amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor amendment is adopted.
The next floor amendment is out of order because it's to the committee sub, which was rejected. Then
This would be the
floor amendment A.
floor amendment A. Senator Newman is now ruled out of order, given that the committee sub was rejected.
Floor amendment B, Senator Newman to the floor substitute.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we waive the reading of the floor substitute listed as B.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor substitute B be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor substitute B is waived. Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, I'm offering this floor amendment. It is part of an amendment that the Senate Finance Committee considered on Monday, and I'll get into the reason why it's not exactly the same. Mr. President, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make what I think is a fairly broad and bad bill a little better. Mr. President, some of you will have note if you've read this bill, and I hope each of you have, that when you get down to lines 36 through 39, it really is the operative part of the bill. The bill does allow for other provisions on how ballots are to be transferred to the registrars, but it also adds a new section which is, I think, extremely problematic, and despite the patron who has done a fantastic job shepherding this bill, I don't think this section has been thought out well in Virginia. So, Mr. President, I'm going to go through and explain kind of why I think we need to do this and what I think it will protect. First, I believe that if we do not make the floor amendment today, we are going to have fraud in the election. I think that's pure and simple. And number two, we will make a leap that we in this General Assembly have never made when it comes to the P&E Committee, when it comes to this floor, or the House of Delegates. And that is, we will for the first time lose the chain of custody between a voter and the ballot box. Mr. President, that is embedded in line 37 of the bill. Mr. President, my concerns and the reason for adding this is I'm not sure that the voter boxes are going to work. I'm not sure that the cost won't be prohibitive. It's going to be over $3,000 per box. No indication how we're going to do that. There is no indication, as Senator Norman had indicated, how we're going to get these boxes. These boxes are very longer lead time than what is anticipated in this bill. Mr. President, as a side note, I'm concerned about the safety of that ballot box. Maybe we'll talk more about that tomorrow, but what if someone pours bleach in one of these boxes and all of them are erased? What happens if there's a cherry bomb or a firecracker that goes into one at a precinct where you think voters aren't voting your way, and those are lost? There's no way to track those back to the voters and have them recast their ballots. Mr. President, the floor amendment helps solve another problem that I think that is looming, and that is the issue of fraud. Mr. President, in the committee, there was some discussion about the fact that for the first time, we could allow, get this, community organizers to go door to door to door and say, I understand that the U.S. mail sent you your ballot today. Why don't you let me take that back for you, and I will take it to the ballot box. Overnight, there's no idea what would happen to that ballot. There's no idea if whether or not it will make it to the ballot. Mr. President, I know if they tamper with it, it'll be a felony, but you'll never get to that. You'll never know what happened to those ballots. That's why anytime we allow a surrogate to help with a ballot, there's always an election official there, and for the first time, we'll be moving in a different direction. Mr. President, in committee, I offered this with a felony. I was offering that because I saw the pictures of the California box, and it has a big words on there, felony, if you do certain items. And so I thought that Virginia should be at least a little closer to where California was. Mr. President, I have dropped that out of the floor amendment. The floor amendment now goes on line 38 after little I3 and says that if you're going to have a drop-off location, then you keep the chain of custody, that it needs to be dropped off by the voter. Now, that doesn't seem to be too tough. We have mail-in ballots today. We're going to allow you to do mail-in ballots. There's no requirement for witnesses. The court gave an injunction related to witnesses. This simply says that we are not planning, that we're not messaging from this General Assembly that we don't care about the chain of custody between a voter and the ballot. Mr. President, so therefore what it does is it says, if you read it along with the floor amendment, it says that little item 3 will say that you can have the ballot that by the voter to be dropped off at the location. Mr. President, I think that's the least that we can do. This would be taking a step where Virginia has had, in my opinion, some of the best and most secure voters processes there is out there. We will be moving without a felony, without a criminal penalty, except for the general provisions that are in this code section that are a Class 1 misdemeanor, to basically encouraging outside agencies, even people from out of state, that can come and collect your ballot for you, and not even promise they're going to deliver it, but they're going to take it wherever they want to, even back to corporate headquarters, and then determine when to drop it off. And they don't have to drop it off at night, not at midnight. They're not cameras. They can drop it off anytime in broad daylight. They can drop 10, they can drop 40, they can drop 1,000 of them into the ballot box. Mr. President, this stops that. This amendment would say that when it comes to these voter boxes, which have no security, there's some discussion about trying to get some security, is not outlined in this bill, and what you end up doing is you end up saying that others can go between the voter and the ballot box. Mr. President, I really hope that we would consider this in committee. A similar version was rejected, but it was discussed in there that the penalty didn't match the crime. Some concerns about the felony, if you will. And I understood that, and therefore I have dropped the penalty. I've just said, please, Virginians, do it correctly. Let's make sure that we take the fraud out. Let's take any individual, any corporation out between the voter and the ballot box, and this would assure that that happens. Mr. President, you've been very kind to allow me to speak. Thank you, sir.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from James City County? Senator Norman, rise. What purpose is Senator from Alexandria? Senator Eben, rise.
Speaking to against the amendment.
Senator, has the floor.
The senator from Bedford limits in his amendment who can return the ballot, and he said, well, regardless of what he said, the way it's written, it says it has to be returned by the voter. So I would like to be able, for people to be able to trust their spouse to return their ballot. I'd like them to be able to trust their relative to return their ballot. I'd like them to be able to trust their caretaker to return the ballot. I'd like them to be able to trust who they choose to, the same way they would choose a commercial delivery service or the U.S. Postal Service if that's who they trust at that date, based on when the ballot would be returned. All of the ballots have unique barcodes, so they're tracked every step of the way, and I think it's important for the people to know that they can track to see that the ballot was in fact received, and if it was not, that they could vote provisionally. I think the amendment limits making it easier for people to vote absentee. People who vote absentee cannot always get there in person, and this is, I'm more concerned about limiting it. I don't see fraud coming, so with that I ask that we reject the amendment.
Mr. President.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Would the gentleman rise for the purpose of the question?
Senator, yield for a question.
I do. I yield.
Senator Yields, you have the floor.
Mr. President, the gentleman raised the issue of family members and some clarified individuals. If we were willing, and I would be willing, to amend the amendment to add family members and some of the items there, would you then be okay with the amendment? Or I guess the question is it the desire of the gentleman that a third party, even community organizers, have the ability to come between the voter and that ballot box?
Senator has the floor.
Yes, to answer the gentleman, I haven't contemplated community organizers or what format or had experience with that, but I don't think that it needs an amendment. I think letting the voter decide how to return the ballot is key. It has to have the voter's signature on the ballot, and I don't see a need for it. So no, I would not support it.
Mr. President, I thank the gentleman. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to reiterate what the senator from Alexandria said. We are in extraordinary times. This bill is limited to one election. It is not a permanent change. It is trying to deal with how do we keep those Virginians who are the most vulnerable to coronavirus safe and allow them to exercise their right to vote. And for most of those people, they already have barriers to voting. It's the 88-year-old mother with a pre-existing condition who has been in her house, has not left her house except to go to a doctor's appointment since the state of emergency was declared, but has relied on not just a family member, but in some cases a caregiver to take care of everything else. And having her or the disabled man or any other vulnerable person have to get in a car with another person, exposing them to coronavirus, go somewhere and drop the box is exactly what we're trying to avoid because they're scared to do that. And unfortunately, because of things that have happened in Washington, they have no confidence that if they put that ballot in the mail, it will be received and counted. And some of these people are the very people who have fought barriers to voting and are scared that they are not going to be able to exercise a right that they fought for. That 88-year-old mother is not theoretical. This is a very limited provision to allow them to vote in confidence, safely. And my understanding is there's already a provision, and the chair of Privileges and Elections can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there are already provisions that can be charged with someone for interfering with the vote if they take that ballot and throw it away. If not, I welcome somebody to point out to me I'm wrong, and maybe we can put that in, that if you take a ballot and don't deliver it, there's a penalty for that. I'm happy to explore that, but I am not willing to put a provision in place that puts yet another barrier in the place of already vulnerable people to exercise their right to vote.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Peterson, rise?
Rise to speak to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, it's not often I disagree, and it's a gentle disagree with my colleague from the city of Lynchburg, but I do think that this is not a necessary protection. I think there's this idea that somehow armies of volunteers are going to be going door to door in the election. I will tell you, we're not that well organized, for one thing. And secondly, in this day and age, it's just not going to be happening. So I think, first of all, that fear is overestimated. Secondly, and I agree with my colleague from the city of Richmond, I also live with an elderly person who's disabled. It happens to be my mother-in-law. And this is actually a very helpful provision. Look, at the end of the day, they have to sign the ballot. The ballot is sealed. How they get it to a voting location or how they put it in the mail or whether or not they give it to a FedEx delivery man, at the end of the day, they sign the ballot. The ballot is put away. It's sealed. The registrar will receive that ballot. They can inspect that ballot. I think this is an unnecessary precaution. Again, I say this with a gentle disagreement, but I think the bill as it stands right now is in the proper shape.
Thank the senator. What purpose does the senator from Northern Chesapeake, Senator Spruill, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
I want to take a different approach. The senator from Bedford, I agree with what he's trying to do. Just like we are trying to safeguard, to make sure everything is done fair and honest. To me, what happens that box, what happens when someone puts some Clorox in that box? What happens to that? When we're trying to make sure that our citizens really have the opportunity to vote. And yes, and now we do not have any faith on what is going on in Washington with the mailbox, but at the same time, doing this, let's make sure this is done fair. It's needed. But we have to have some safeguard too on this. This is very important because even for just one time, if we have fraud, the box is stuffed, a whole lot of stuff, then there you go. You move from the post office to a box. Everything can happen with that box if it's not safeguarded. So I want to make sure, while we are trying to make sure that our citizens have the opportunity to vote in a safe, honest system, at the same time, we've got to make sure that that box is safe and protected. So with that, I am going to support the amendment from Bedford. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Speak to the amendment.
Senator's the floor.
Thank you. I first have to start off by saying I never thought that I'd see the day where the gentleman from Bedford would say he wanted to be more like California. I can't believe it. But I will tell you, this bill is fraught with terrible consequences. The idea of the 88-year-old mother or the disabled person or the infirm needing somebody to take their ballot to the, quote, ballot box that doesn't exist, by the way, is a little suspicious. There is nothing in this bill that keeps somebody from going door to door to door or in a nursing home from room to room to room and harvesting ballots. Not a thing. This is voter fraud waiting to happen. Now, comments have been made about the post office, the United States Post Office. If you have faith in the post office for absentee ballots, put $500 in an envelope, address it to yourself. I don't think many people are going to do that because I don't think they expect to see their $500 back. Mr. President, we've heard from registrars that this is not really tenable. We've heard from registrars they have difficulty finding out where they're going to get these boxes. We've heard from registrars some of the difficulties that are happening with this bill. And fine, we're giving them $2 million, but you know what? If they can't find a box, $2 million isn't going to help. And the simple suggestion by the senator from Bedford would be that the bill be cast by the voter, or, as he offered, by a family member. But even that was rejected, which leads me to believe that while maybe the Democrat Party of Virginia isn't that well organized, the National Democrat Party is. And we can see this type of thing happening. This bill is just a massive infringement on the voting process in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I would hope that the senator's offer of amending it further so that a family member can deliver that ballot would be accepted. Otherwise, tell me why these ballots can't be harvested by outside groups. Tell me. And if you can tell me why they won't be, then I might be convinced. We're here because of, quote, COVID-19 and criminal justice reform. We're here now for vote harvesting. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, Senator from Bath? Senator Deeds, rise.
Mr. President, I'd rise to speak to the substitute of the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Amendment. My fear is that people are looking for something that's not there. This bill is not about voter harvesting. It's about making sure that everybody in this Commonwealth who wants to participate in this time of COVID has an opportunity to do that. Now, as much as I love my senator from my friend from Northern Chesapeake, I've got to disagree with him violently. What do you do about that 88-year-old widow who's in her home without children, without family members, only with caregivers? What are you saying? You're saying she can't vote? I say that's disenfranchisement. We have to be about letting people vote. 30 states use lock boxes or drop-off boxes such as this. We're not inventing the wheel here. It's not about voter harvesting. It's about making sure everybody has the opportunity to participate in the most basic franchise of American citizenship. This amendment just encumbers that process, and I hope you will reject it.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would the gentleman from Bedford or the gentleman from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, yield for a question?
President, I yield.
Senator from Bedford yields. You have the floor.
I believe I am as sensitive to mischief as anybody in this room. And so I'm accepting the premise, and I'm serious. I'm serious. And I'm not going to go into it like I did last year, but I am sensitive to possible mischief. I really am. Here's what I'm trying to understand. I heard Senator Cosgrove suggest that you could be harvesting the votes. And it appears to me that the harvesting would be because a well-organized individual who has a list of every absentee ballot mailed by the registrar to the voter goes to those homes. I get it, and that can be done. And then gets that ballot. I need to know what he is suggesting is, or you, Senator Newman, is going to be done if that were done. Get the ballot and then go to the ballot box or go to the mailbox. What is the difference if you were inclined to engage in mischief?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, my concern is that you lose the chain of custody. When you take a ballot that is neutral and unknown as far as its intent, and you put it into the U.S. mail and it is sent and it is secured and it's tracked, it's much different than an organization being allowed, not just allowed, but in this bill encouraged to be able to go out and harvest those votes. There's nothing in this bill that speaks to what happens when they go to that door, and they are going to go to the door. I read to you, Mr. President, it may help the senator, who I think is a truth seeker on this, an email that was sent out in Florida that tells exactly what's planned to do. This happens to be from a group, and I don't know this group, but it's IRCMS. They're a very friendly group, very entrepreneur group. They sent out the email to organizations saying, you need to hire us, IRCMS, to augment your Get Out the Vote effort. And we can add, get this, an army of ballot retrieval professionals to your effort. A large field staff, phoning and driving and to the doors for your targeted list, and yet to have returned their ballots in the final weeks before the election cycle. So the concern that this is not organized or can be organized, it is, and I would say there are profiteers that are prepared to help. So the question relates to tampering, and the senator from Bath talked about the fact that, or the senator from Richmond City talked about the fact that there's a felony. Mr. President, even to your question, you're never going to get there. In other words, I don't think you're ever going to get to the fraud. You're certainly never going to get to the felony of tampering, because it requires intent in that section, and you'll never know the intent when you end up having a ballot that is in someone's home or in the hands of a group like this that is actually out there doing it. So I'm telling you that I'm concerned that introducing a group, a third party, not a disinterested U.S. mail, but a third party ends up introducing the opportunity for a group that has an agenda to do something in that, and you'll never get to the fraud section because you will happen at a location out of the voter's view.
Mr. President, would the gentleman yield for another question?
Senator Yield.
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
I am already to the point that you could hire a cadre of these experts to go around. I'm already there. You don't have to convince me. Here's my question. What is the difference between that group going around to the nursing home, room by room, and getting the ballot that's already been sealed, putting a stamp on it, and then taking 50 of those ballots to the post office, to the mailbox on the corner versus dropping them off in the location? Couldn't that be done right now?
Mr. President,
Senator, the floor.
I respectfully say I don't think so. One, the tracking that will occur under the federal act is going to be extensive for the voter. I think you'll be able to see when it arrived at your sorting station, when it arrived at the sorting station at the destination location. You'll be able to determine when the item is delivered, and so you'll have tracking mechanisms. On a third party like this, that is in most cases going to be an interested third party that comes between the ballot box and the voter and the ballot box, there will not be, and there's nothing in this bill except for what is the normal tracking information on a ballot that allows you that opportunity to get that information.
Speak to the measure, Mr. President.
Senator, the floor.
And first, I want to thank the Senator for his responses.
Mr. President, may I respond?
Certainly.
Senator Yield. Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Yield.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'd answer the gentleman from the junior senator from Richmond. He brings up some good questions, and I do believe that he is a truth seeker. I would say, though, in answer to this question, because he did ask both Senator Newman and myself our concerns, but it's easily identifiable in many cases if somebody's going from room to room to room, if somebody's wearing a MAGA hat and then somebody else is wearing a Biden hat, what's to keep that third party from saying, well, there's the MAGA hat and here's the Biden hat, or vice versa? Nothing. Nothing. That's my concern, sir.
All right. Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
All right. There have been legitimate concerns raised by both people, but here's the way I see things. It is absolutely true that there is that 88-year-old invalid that doesn't get out of her or his house and cannot go to that ballot box. That's absolutely true. There are individuals who are either bedridden or homebound. They are serviced by caregivers. They execute an application for an absentee ballot. It's sent to their home, and their caregiver or the person with whom they live at the house will help them fill it out, and then they'll take that and drop that in the mailbox. I really don't see why we even need, this drop box, this on item number 3, where it says a drop-off location. That's the first problem that we have here. Why do you need a drop-off location if you can drop it in the United States post office box? That's the first question. The second one is the real problem here hasn't been even identified. It's this. You get a group of people in a nursing home, or you get a group of people from the voter list in Hopewell who have caregivers, and there's 240 of them where their caregiver goes. You send your expert to that person's house, they apply for an application, they make an application for an absentee ballot, and it's sent to them, and then that same group goes back to those people and says, here's who you vote for, Biden or Trump. That's the real problem that no one has addressed. But the problem is not the language where there's a drop-off location. We've got drop-off locations, folks. It's called that blue and red and white United States Post Office box. I'm telling you, I want to avoid mischief any way possible here, but I'm concerned that the real potential of going to the nursing homes and the people that are in house bedridden or homebound hasn't been addressed. I'm sorry for my trespassing on your time too much. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from James City County, Senator Norman, rise?
Mr. President, I rise to speak about the proposed amendment.
Senator has the floor.
First point, and this is redundant, this discussion and debate should have taken place in front of the Privileges and Elections Committee. We took the unusual approach of sending it to Finance because it had a fiscal implication. Very little of this dialogue is that we are now enjoying, and the passion is focused on the money. It is focused on the underlying policy issue. Second point that I would make, Mr. President, is that it is obviously very much, almost very much, a partisan issue. And I just was sitting here noodling on my phone, which is always challenging based upon my lack of IT experience. But I went to that highly partisan Republican publication known as the Wall Street Journal. And back in June, the Wall Street Journal offered an opinion and editorial that was not from a partisan perspective, and the title of it is Beware the Fall Ballot Harvest. Too many states are preparing for a potential vote-by-mail mess. And in the substance of it, it says the Democratic House, and they're not speaking about our House of Delegates, they are speaking about the numbnuts in Washington, D.C., which are bipartisan. The Democratic House passed a bill that would mandate, quote, ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting, that's not a term that the senator from Chesapeake created. That is what is out in the national media. The Democratic House passed a bill that would mandate ballot harvesting nationwide, letting paid activists canvass neighborhoods to collect absentee ballots. That was in June. I would just suggest, Mr. President, that even though this seems to be a partisan divide, that there are opinions out there that are not inconsistent with those of us on this side of the aisle are arguing, but are clearly being articulated by very respected nationwide publications.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, as I listen to the debate, and we have debated this for many years, it occurs to me that as we seem to polarize, forget party, into two different opinions. It's either that everybody has to have access to a vote and that's being prevented, or we must secure the election so that we have confidence in the outcomes. And I would suggest, Mr. President, we're responsible for both. And anything that does not include both efforts is a false narrative. I have a 91-year-old father who hasn't left the house, but we will make sure that he has the opportunity to vote, and I want to make sure everybody does. As we look at these lines of the bill that are being contested now, 36 to 39, we have mailed-in absentee ballots shall be returned by mail. I understand there's some people that are questioning our U.S. mail. However, there are felonies if you tamper with it. It is secure, and there are means to track it, as have been mentioned before. By voter in person to the registrar, another, by the way, drop-off location in addition to the mailboxes, and by a commercial delivery service that would be able to verify the location of the ballot throughout the entire course of transmission, and then in a drop-off location. And You know, Mr. President, I will mention that when you talk about the elderly and making sure they have an ability to deliver this, the senator from Bedford has very willingly agreed to amend this floor amendment to accommodate any of those exceptions. But honestly, a drop-off location, we have a nation that is battling over the security of our elections. It is our sacred duty to make sure that Virginians know that their elections are actually factual and not tampered with. And we are not doing that by listing an insecure drop-off location. I don't care what hyperbole or theory you have on either side of what the outcome might be that is negative and supports either side of the narrative instead of both. I find this particularly amazing, Mr. President, when we all had the ability to order on Amazon. And when I order on Amazon, I know they got my order. I know when they mail it to me. I know when it's in the mail going back to them, and I know we know every single location. So the lack of security in an unsecured drop box is baffling to me. And I think that we have the ability, despite our partisan differences, to do the right thing for Virginia by making sure elections are fair both by access and by security, and this bill violates that sacred duty. And I would ask, Mr. President, if I may, if any members of the body that are supporting this bill in general without amending anything on line 38, and maybe the patron herself, what verification do you have that is secure? You know, when you ask a question, you don't say, here's the worst case scenario, tell me it's not going to happen. You say, prove to me that what you are doing actually secures the premise of a secure election. Mr. President, would the patron yield?
Will the senator yield?
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Madam Chairman, I do support access to open elections and making sure everybody can mail in their ballot, but please reassure us how in any way are these drop box locations secure in the way that the other three means of returning a ballot is.
Senator has the floor.
I'd respond to the senator that under the bill, elect is going to pass guidance that needs to be followed. I'd also point out that 30 states are doing this. As is often the case, Virginia lags far behind. And I have been listening to this and trying to stay in a mellow mood and not angry, but I would like to point out for the last 10 years, the majority, the then majority party was doing nothing but trying to suppress the vote. So things are changing now. We want to encourage people to vote and to make it as safe as we possibly can during a pandemic.
Further question?
Mr. President, just follow up, and I would say that I do need to associate my comments with the junior senator from Richmond City. I believe that we are able to absolutely give full access to all voters with all of the limitations they may have to securely turn in their ballots by mailing, by in-person drop-off to the register, or by commercial delivery service. Mr. President, I am concerned that even this floor amendment does not go far enough to make sure we do protect our elections, but I would challenge this body to not get caught up in partisan politics and both make sure voters have access and that elections are secure, and we're not doing it.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from Prince William County, Senator McPike, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator from Bedford yield for a question?
Senator Yield?
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask the senator from Bedford, is it not true under 24.2 today that it is a felony, class 5, to destroy a ballot?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would say thank you to the gentleman for the questions because it requires intent, and I think that he knows you'll never, never, never get to that. You will never show intent on what happened in the basement. You will never show intent. So the felony is in there. It's very clear it can be used when you can show the intent, but you're never going to get there. And that's the reason why I think the gentleman should vote for the floor amendment.
Further question?
I yield.
Mr. President, I'll yield to the gentleman if he has a question to me. Otherwise, I'd like to speak to the floor amendment.
Sorry. Yes, sir.
Senator, has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the motion, I mean, this seemed to be absent from the debate and discussion so far. I wanted to point it out for those that might be watching. It is a felony today. If anybody goes around and collects and a ne'er-do-well decides to collect ballots and destroy them. That can happen today, right? Someone can go in and convince someone to give them your ballot and go destroy it. That would be a Class 5 felony under Virginia law. With these changes proposed by the Chair of Finance and the patron of the bill, that's not going to change. We still have this framework that says you shall be guilty of a Class 5 felony in Virginia. That's not going to change. So the whole discussion about this is going to open up, frankly, if people want to be ne'er-do-wells, they could do that today. They'd be felons for doing it, rightly so. So nothing in this bill changes that premise in Virginia. So that has not been a part of this debate so far. And Mr. President, I'd like the body to reject the amendment. We have strong framework in place, which will remain in place. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Roanoke City? Senator Edwards rise.
Mr. President, I rise to oppose the floor amendment.
Senator, has the floor.
Mr. President, if you look at the bill, it's very careful. The two issues have been raised, as I recall. One is, what's the security of the drop box itself? Well, the bill itself provides that there should be, I'll read here, necessary security requirements for the box itself. And that includes, I understand, surveillance cameras. And the second security is the ballots in the drop box will be collected daily. So that's as much security as you're going to get with a mailbox. The second issue has to do with chain of custody. How do we know if somebody takes the 88-year-old infirm person who cannot get out of the home, a relative takes the ballot to the drop box? Well, it does require specifically that there shall be a chain of custody, and one of the factors has to do with signing a witness and signature, comparing the signature and so forth. That's in the bill too. Now, this particular election only, because of the pandemic that we're in, that's not a material difference. That's in the bill. That if a person, the signature comparison is not a material, the witness requirement is not material on this election only because of this particular situation we're in. That's the only difference. But Mr. President, the idea that anybody is going to start harvesting a bunch of bills and not reporting them or not turning them in or somehow changing them somehow, the in-person fraud in elections is almost nil. I've heard the thing, it's more likely that you're going to be struck by lightning than the fact that there's going to be in-person voter fraud. In fact, in this financial impact statement, it says, according to the Circuit Court Case Management System for fiscal year 2014 to 2019, there were no convictions under the existing absentee voting requirement. So, Mr. President, the idea of widespread fraud is just not the case. Now, I've been told, we've heard this before, 30 states are doing this. Virginia can do it, and Virginia ought to do it, especially given the situation we're in right now. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Arlington? Senator Favola rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak to the amendment.
Senator, has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has been a very interesting debate, and many valid points have been made. I just want to sort of state the obvious, so maybe we can get to a vote. We are living in unusual times. Not only do we have a pandemic, but we've all been reading stories about the United States Postal Service. They're asking for a $25 billion infusion so they can continue operating. We've heard that there have been layoffs at the Postal Service. We've heard that the sorting machines have been, a portion of the sorting machines have been done away with. Mr. DeJoy had to, the Postmaster General was testifying in front of the United States Congress and did not instill a sense of security or a sense that the United States Postal Service could actually deliver ballots on time in an incredibly important election. All of us on both sides of the aisle have heard from constituents saying, we need another pathway. We want to be able to vote. It is a constitutional right. We want to be able to exercise it. Constituents on both sides of the aisle have said, I don't want to compromise my health. I don't want to compromise the health of my family, but I want to vote. So please come up with another way. We don't trust the mail system now. We need to be able to vote in another way. We don't want to vote in person. This is the only alternative we have. So an individual can physically drop off their ballot at a drop box. And I would venture to say that most of our jurisdictions are probably going to have the drop boxes located in the registrar's office, because it says here, it's in one of our lines 62 or 63, I don't have it right in front of me, that certainly is an option. I think we're underestimating the fact that our registrars are not going to take every step possible to ensure that there is integrity in the election and that ballots, in fact, are secure. The senator from Roanoke spoke about the custody requirements. Regulations are yet to be issued. I don't believe for a minute that anybody who is advocating for drop boxes does not care about the security of the ballot. We do care. We do care. We want people to be able to vote. We want them to be able to vote in a secure way. But again, we are in extraordinary times. I certainly cannot face my constituents and say we didn't take every conceivable step to allow you to vote in the midst of a pandemic when the United States Postal Service is simply not working well. Regrettably, I have to ask the body to reject the amendment and to support the bill that Senator Howell has put forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the junior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Hashmi, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the amendment.
Senator, you have the floor.
I don't want to prolong this conversation, this debate too much longer, but I have to address the issue that I think has been reoccurring time and time again on this debate, and that is the debate over the issue of voter fraud versus voter suppression. When we consider the issue of voter fraud, we hear the tactics of fear-mongering, the perception that somehow one party or another will engage in what's called ballot harvesting, which I have to point out is not even a legal or a recognized term, and that there will be corruption in the process of election. There is absolutely no evidence about any kind of sustained voter fraud in the history of this country. I ask all members to review the Brennan Center for Justice and their substantial review of the voter history process in this nation and the lack of evidence that has ever emerged that there is a coordinated effort to undermine elections. As Senator Edwards has already pointed out, the likelihood of anybody impersonating another voter is less likely than your chance of being struck by lightning. We have no evidence of voter fraud, but we have evidence of voter suppression. There is a long history in this country of disenfranchising populations, restricting access to the ballot box, and ensuring that some communities simply have no ability to be represented. If we're going to talk about real voter fraud, We need to be looking at the tactics of suppression that have undermined our democracy. This bill is strong. It is one that many of our constituents have been asking for. It reinstates that opportunity for access to voting in a very, very challenging time, and I urge that we will support the bill without the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak in favor of, or to speak against Senate Bill 5120 and in support of Senator Newman's amendment.
Thank the senator. You have the floor, and was just reminded all senators will need to stand when they address the chair. Thank the senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I stand here today as a former member of Senate Privileges and Elections and serving on that committee right after a presidential election in which we, those of us who were in a joint House and Senate committee right after we suspected fraud that occurred right after the last presidential election. So I would take issue with any legislator on this body that says that we do not have fraud here in Virginia. There were many cases, even in Harrisonburg at JMU, where we saw questionable situations and blatant fraud. Mr. President, I rise here today to say that we need to make sure that everyone's vote counts. And yes, do we need to make sure there's accessibility? Absolutely. But when the registrars who run our elections are not for this bill, I think we need to take into account what they have to say. What confidence do we have that when a voter drops off their vote in a random box that is unsecured and is unattended, that their vote is gonna matter? We need to have accountability. I also take issue with the state that there's no such thing as ballot harvesting. The Heritage Foundation actually did an incredible study that you all can reference in regards to ballot harvesting that took place in California. And there's an April 20th, 2020 article on America's hidden voting epidemic with mail ballot failures. And I won't read this in depth, but it says that unsupervised mail ballots encourage vote buying, intimidation, and absentee ballot fraud, as previously seen in North Carolina, Mississippi, and Texas. Mr. President, I would also add, in addition to that, that if these masks work so well and are so effective, and that people can go into Lowe's, they can go to the grocery store, they can go in the ABC store, and businesses that are considered essential, then, Mr. President, I would argue they can also march themselves and vote if these masks are so effective. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, Senator from Loudoun County, Senator Bell, rise?
Speaking to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, Mr. President, there's been much said on this, and I won't try to delay this much longer than we have to, but I would like to say two things that I don't think have been said. And I think it comes down to the main point. Why are we here? Why are we talking about this amendment? Why are we talking about this bill? We've got a pandemic. We all know about that. We're wearing masks. We're taking precautions today. And we've got a president who's basically undermined and failed us in his leadership. From the beginning, he said this thing would just go away like magic. He said it wasn't a big deal. If he would have led us the way he was supposed to lead us, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. And that's why we're taking measures in November, because we've had a failure of leadership from the top. And the second thing I want to say about this that I think is true is that this president has kneecapped the post office. And that's the quote from President Obama. He put someone in as postmaster who has no experience in the Postal Service. He's refused to provide them funding, even though there's documented case after case where funding was needed to operate. There's backlogs. Our Postal Service is a key foundation to our country's success. Many rural areas have no other way of getting mail or communications other than the Postal Service. Yet this president has ignored that. So we're here today because we've got this pandemic where we've had no leadership, and we've got a president who's trying his best to undermine the Postal Service. We have to take these measures. I'll stand against this amendment and I'll vote for this bill because we need another avenue to get our votes in. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senator from Northwestern Fairfax, Senator Boysko, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the amendment. And
Senator has the floor.
thank you. I wanted to respond to the junior senator of Chesterfield who brought up the joint commission, the meeting we had with P&E a couple of years ago about a report and voter fraud that was rampant here in Virginia. However, the person who put together that alien report was sued and was forced to apologize and admit that there was no incidence of voter fraud in a lawsuit. Christian Adams and his group, the Public Interest Legal Foundation, were sued over the alien invasion reports. Under the terms, PILF was having to remove it from its website, and the report exhibits containing the individual's personal information. According, they also had to add a statement that they recognized that individuals were in fact citizens and these citizens did not commit felonies. PILF profoundly regrets any characterization of registrants as felons or instances of registration or voting as felonies. What I want to point out is there is a narrative that continues to be propagated that voting is not going to be safe, that people are going to try to game the system. However, it does not wash. It does not come out in the facts. And we are simply, as all of my colleagues have said today, trying to address the needs of the people who have no other choice because they are isolated. And I ask the body to reject the amendment and to pass the bill. Thank you.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw, rise?
Just to speak to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
You know, Mr. President, I've been here a long time, seen a lot of changes in our election laws. Some were necessary, some were not. This is. You've already had the post office already say that there's no guarantee that they're going to try and do their best, but because of all the problems there, that they can get ballots delivered by Election Day. You know, 30 states have this drop box, 30 states, including such heavily Democratic states like Georgia, Kansas, Nebraska, Montana. And, you know, they don't seem to be having any problems. And I don't know about your constituents. I think my constituents are smart enough not to hand this ballot to any Tom, Dick, and Harry that knocks on the door and says, I'm from so-and-so and I'll deliver your ballot. You gotta have a real problem there to hand that ballot out. Since around 2007 or 8, a lot of bills were passed in this country that didn't make it easier to vote. They made it harder to vote. One state, Southwest, passed a voter ID law. And it said this: college IDs with a picture on it were not acceptable. But concealed weapon permits that didn't have a picture, they were. Now, to quote former Governor Wilder, even Ray Charles could see through that, okay? We ought to be here making it easier for people to vote, not more difficult. 30 states have this, and they don't have the problems. When you talk about voter fraud, and I heard the senator from, the senior senator from Chesterfield remark about James Madison University. The only time I've seen an article make the paper about voter fraud, a few presidential elections ago in Virginia. There were 30 cases of it in a statewide election. 30 cases. Is that a lot? Well, it was out of 3 million votes cast, or 1 every 100,000. That's your great voter fraud. 1 out of every 100,000. I've talked to Commonwealth attorneys in populated municipalities. They've never prosecuted a case of voter fraud, and they said it's a phony issue. Like I said, I don't know about your constituents. You do, I don't, but mine are smart enough not to hand this ballot out to any clown that comes by their house, regardless of who they identify with. If they don't know them, we need to pass the bill, defeat this amendment, and pass the bill.
Mr. President.
Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Would my friend resume the floor for the purpose of the question?
Absolutely.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I appreciate the impassioned discussion. Alas, we're talking about 3 words. And my question to the gentleman is, how many states allow an individual, other than the voter, because the amendment we're talking about is by the voter, how many states allow an individual that is not the voter to place it into these ballot boxes in those 30 states?
In the drop box.
Senator, has the floor.
I can't give you the total.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Do any senators wish to be heard for the first time? Seeing none, the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrison.
Mr. President, I've already spoken, but would you permit me to ask the patron of the bill one question and the senator from Henrico County one question, because I'm actually one of those senators who's on the fence as to how to vote. May I do that?
You may. And so do you want the patron of the
would the senior senator, the senator from North Fairfax County, Senator Howe, yield for a question?
Well, Senator Yield. Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Howe, can you tell us how you would envisage this box? Where would it be located? Would it be located in Town Square, outside of the registrar's office in Petersburg? How do you envisage this box, as well as how will it be secured?
Senator has the floor.
I would answer the gentleman that the bill is explicit on that prior to Election Day, they will be located on public property outside of or inside of the registrar's office. And on Election Day, there will be one at every voting precinct. And before Election Day, as I recall, they will also have them at satellite voting locations.
Further question?
I thank the senator. Would the senator from Henrico County, Senator Donovan, yield for a question?
Senator Yield?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. President, I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
I would preface my question that this first vote just deals with the amendment, and then after that we get to the bill itself. My question, Senator Donovan, is this. If you, like me, agree that this extra box is unnecessary, how are you going to vote on this amendment that adds words, 3 words, in front of that box? Are you still going to vote for the amendment that is in favor of this extra box, or are you going to reject it? Because you, like me, don't believe a box is necessary.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I'm going to vote in favor of this amendment because I think any way in which we can specify how we proceed with this bill, I am not optimistic that I necessarily have the power to make the changes to this bill that I think are in the best interest of Virginia. And I know the timetable we're on and how this is going and how the votes stack up. But, Mr. President, I will support this amendment because I think it makes at least a small attempt to curtail what is an unnecessary aspect of our attempt to make voting easy during COVID. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the senator.
Thanks, Senator. For what purpose is the senator from Russell, Senator Chafin, rise?
Mr. President, I rise to speak in favor of the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
And I didn't intend to speak at all. But this discussion about voter fraud being false and not occurring throughout the United States, I just had to comment on that because when I started my career almost 36 years ago as a lawyer, I was an assistant Commonwealth attorney and a prosecutor. And one of the first cases assigned to me was a voter fraud case. And we were able to secure several convictions. People pled guilty to it. This has been a long time ago. And through the course of my career, I became a private attorney, left the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And during the course of my career, I had the opportunity on several occasions to represent different defendants who were charged with voter fraud in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I live in a small community, and my practice takes me around to a lot of adjoining counties. And I can tell you that when the stakes are high, the criminals come out. Now, we know that we are living, as everybody, a lot of people have commented, in unprecedented times, extraordinary times. And we know there's a spike in criminal activity. We know that's going on too, because of any number of reasons. So, Mr. President, I just wanted to say, we all know the tooth fairy is not real, or maybe we don't. Maybe some of us believe in Bigfoot. Okay, but grown adults with an educated background who have run for election ought not to get up and talk about there's no voter fraud, because it happens. And we ought to do the responsible thing, and that is make it more difficult to do it. Balance the scales. And that's all that the senator from Bedford's amendment does. It makes it a bit more difficult to keep a voter from being disenfranchised from their vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Virginia Beach, Senator DeStaff, rise?
Mr. President, I'm going to make this quick. I actually wasn't going to speak on this until I heard multiple times that it's not about voter suppression. I'm sorry, it's about voter suppression, not voter fraud, and we don't have any. We don't have it in the Commonwealth. We don't have it in the United States. Well, let me just go through a couple of examples. In 2020, conviction, criminal conviction. 2018, all of these criminal convictions, criminal convictions, criminal convictions. Here's even a great one of multiple times. And this is somebody who served 100 days in jail. So if he admitted to it, he served 100 days in jail, and since I know folks are like, give us the facts, cite your sources, happy to do it. Andrew J. Spiles pleaded guilty to charges stemming from his submission of 18 fraudulent voter registrations in connections with the 2016 presidential election. While working in Harrisonburg Votes, a voter registration organization affiliated with the Democratic Party, Spies falsified voter registration information. In some cases, he registered deceased individuals. In others, he fabricated information about residents so he could submit applications without their approval. He was sentenced to 100 days imprisonment. And we can go on to Mary Taylor, Billy Everett, Gregory Brunei, Stephen Hawes, Jennifer Debris, all of these folks convicted, criminal convicted, all of them admitted to it. They paid fines, they were given 5 years probation, 10 years probation, 15 years suspended. I mean, I can go on. But there's not one, there's not two, there are almost 100 here just on this little scroll alone, and I only went back a few years. So, Mr. President, I think we should be voting and understand the facts of what we're talking about here, and I think we should be able to cite our sources on those facts, and I'm happy to do it. Anyone who wants this, I'm happy to email it to you. But, Mr. President, when we get up and we say, oh, there's no voter fraud in the Virginia, we don't have it, it doesn't exist, Well, actually it does. And when you take advantage of 36 individuals who are in an institution and who truly, in that institution, these individuals cannot feed themselves. They can't think for themselves. They have little or no brain activity, yet they vote in every Democratic election, a primary, and every general election. And they have for years. And Mr. President, when things of that nature happen, I have to stand up and provide the facts. We do have voter fraud. It does exist. People have admitted to it. They've been convicted. They've served time. They've paid fines. They've paid penalties. And some of these have been felonies. So they can't vote ever again because of what they did to try to game and fraudulently game our voter system. Now, there's a lot of retired military or former military in here. And the one thing we did is we fought in wars overseas to protect our ability to have clean, honest elections. And that's all we want. And Mr. President, what this does is gives us another opportunity for a clean, honest election. But if I hear again, there's no such thing as voter fraud, it doesn't exist, I'm happy to share this information with anybody who truly believes that. Because these individuals, not only were they convicted, served time, or paid penalties, they admitted to doing so, Mr. President. So with that, I hope we support this underlying amendment, but I'd be happy if we defeat the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is Senator from Alexandria, Senator Eben, rise?
Yeah, very briefly, I hadn't intended to speak twice, but the senator from Chesterfield had provided some misinformation that I just want to correct. She talked about the bill providing for unsecure random boxes, and I just want to encourage her to read the bill about the regulations from Department of Elections. These would be secure boxes. But further, she reflected a fundamental misunderstanding about how masks are supposed to be used and how social distances measures keep people safe. Parroting those kinds of incorrect statements extends the pandemic and makes these sorts of uncomfortable discussions necessary rather than responding promptly and in a medically accurate way to the pandemic. There are people with underlying conditions, people with COVID-19 themselves. I do not want people with COVID-19 themselves voting. I'd much rather they vote absentee in person. I'd rather they not vote in person. And there's plenty of people who shouldn't be forced to the polling place, who should have the maximum ability to vote absentee. Thank you.
For what purpose is the senior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak again, and I apologize to the body for speaking again.
Senator has the floor.
I do feel it is important that I substantiate my comment earlier. My source for citing fraud here in Virginia, specifically the Harrisonburg case, comes from the United States Department of Justice. Mr. President, the United States Department of Justice is a credible source, specifically the Western District of Virginia, where a Harrisonburg man pleaded guilty to submitting fraudulent voter registration forms. And for any other legislator that would like to reference this, it's Tuesday, June the 20th, 2017. Acting United States Attorney Rick Mountcastle announced that a former staffer with Harrisonburg Votes, a political organization affiliated with the Democratic Party, who was paid to register area voters during the weeks leading up to the 2016 national election, admitted in federal court that he caused 18 fraudulent Virginia voter registration forms to be submitted to the local registrar's office. Mr. President, I would argue, and that was during a time when we actually had voter identification as the law of the land and more accountability. What this bill is doing, what this amendment seeks to do, and that I support, is to ensure the integrity of our elections. As I'm traveling across Virginia, I talk to voters who are concerned that their vote is even going to count. They're terrified about voting by mail even, much less in a random box somewhere that's not secured, that's not attended. What are we going to what's going to happen after the federal election whenever we have these boxes in random communities that go missing? What's the protocol in place for when the boxes go missing? Are we going to go back to hanging chads like we did with Florida? Mr. President, I would urge us to be preventative. We've already implemented many changes legislatively this year with the elimination of mandatory voter ID, and now we're going to add more complexity to a year in which we've already implemented many new changes that are causing many voters a lot of heartburn across Virginia right now, questioning the validity of this coming November's election. We owe that to the voters, Mr. President. We must ensure the integrity of the vote. We must ensure that to all voters, that every single vote matters. And for that reason, I support and am in favor of Senator Newman's amendment, but I also take issue that there's no voter fraud in Virginia, because clearly that is not the case. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any senators other than Senator Newman wish to be heard regarding the amendment? Seeing none, Senator from Bedford, Senator Newman.
Mr. President, thank you, and I want to thank the members for the debate. We've spent over an hour talking about 3 words. Just as a reminder, those 3 words are by the voter. Mr. President, I did not think that that would be that controversial. Mr. President, I tried earlier, although I was trying to give a perspective of why we needed the amendment, not to go into the bill. There's a lot of concerns about the bill, and I think the gentleman from Richmond City has a real concern about the voter boxes. Without this amendment, I think you should have many concerns. Mr. President, the debate has ranged in all directions, from national policy to the Bremer Center for Justice and others. I don't know who these are. I do know this. Some arguments have been made on this floor that I think were well-intentioned, but I don't think they're going to hold water in the next few days. 1, 30 states have this measure. Well, according to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, part of DHS, the CISA, 27 of them have this amendment or a derivative of this amendment. Some of them, to the senator from Alexandria, also have an item for family members. I'm willing to do that. Willing, pretty good point. We could probably add that member. One of them has the ability to have an attorney in the right process bring that back. And one of them has a caregiver, and I think that's something from the senior senator from Richmond City had indicated. Mr. President, we can fix this bill. I'm concerned that today we are not going to fix the bill. This is a national movement. Make no mistake about it. This is a national movement. A bill like this one, I do not know where the senator received this bill, but a bill of this nature is working its way through a number of legislatures. Mr. President, some reasonable concerns have come up today. I have a mother and a father, and my father is my best friend, and my mother is my other best friend. I love my mom and my dad. They are 84 years old. They're in, thank God, good health. I want them to have available mechanisms. When we go to their house, we make them stay on the deck, and we stay on the bottom. We don't get close. We love them, but hugging is gone for a while. I want to protect them. But know this, we have protected them. We have, in Virginia, an expanded absentee ballot. No witnesses, no one has to come close. We have a mail-in ballot. I understand some have concerned about that. No witnesses, but there's other things. We have in-person balloting that will start in a couple of weeks. You're going to actually be able to go to your registrar, in-person balloting, and if you're concerned about COVID, and I think my parents would probably fall in that category, go in and cast their ballot securely in that way. There's going to be curbside. You can actually go and they'll come to the curb and do it for you. There's going to be day of the election curbside ballot. This is all good stuff. But there's been many comments today that during extraordinary times we've got to do this. Mr. President, during extraordinary times we do not have to allow an item that allows an opportunity for voter fraud. And I believe this is what this does. I've got to tell you, if we were to take out, as Senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey said, the voter box, really there's not that much left that's of concern on this bill. I may be able to vote for the bill without that portion. Without it, it'll be very, very, very difficult. Mr. President, the reason why I think we're here for an hour talking about 3 words, by the voter, is because voter integrity is a tremendous issue. It's an item that separates this nation from many others. We send many in to make sure that there's integrity in other countries, but we've been hit in the last few years with concerns about the Soviets or the Russians and the Chinese and others, and there are rightful concerns for all of us. We should never, never allow a foreign agent or another individual to come between us and the ballot box. Mr. President, this amendment removed all the concerns that I heard. I was in committee and we were hearing concerns. One, the concern is about the ballot box. Somebody said, bring on the amendments. So we brought the amendments. We added it. Then it was, the amendments are too strong. We have to remove the felony. The felony's gone. It's just saying, don't do this. We've heard there's no voter harvesting, and now we find out that there are groups out there ready and able to begin the voter harvesting. We've heard that 30 states have a similar to this, but it appears that now that they have version that much different than what has been described here. Instead, they go to family members, some, and some of them to attorneys. Mr. President, this is a very, very simple decision that we have to make. It is a 3-line amendment. I know there's a lot at stake, a lot are concerned about this, but I've got to tell you, what will happen if you vote for my amendment? All the provisions that you are concerned about, all the provisions I've talked about for COVID, for my parents and others, are going to be in place. And one more. You're going to be able to go to a ballot box on your own, far away from anyone else. We're not sure about the security. There's nothing in the bill about cameras yet, but you're going to be able to cast your own ballot there also. Mr. President, the only thing this amendment says is that you cannot go out and, on the behalf of someone else, collect their ballot, take it out of the chain of custody, and then return it at a later time. The last thing I want to talk to you about is fraud. I don't know how much fraud there is. I don't know. Senior Senator from Fairfax talks about it some. Others talked about what they think. I don't know. I'm not sure. The fact is that under this bill, I don't think there will be any prosecutions of felony. I don't think there'll be any. I don't know if there'll be any charges, because I don't know that you will ever get to the felony. I don't think you're going to know what happens in the basement. I don't think you're going to know what ends up happening at that right-wing or left-wing organization. I just don't think you're going to know. I don't think you're ever going to get to it. And if you did, I don't think you are ever going to prove intent. And that's what's required under 18.2 in our criminal code, and you're just not going to get there. Mr. President, I'll end with this. This is about 3 words: by the voter or not. And this amendment will simply say that we will have that continuity, that chain of custody between the voter and the ballot box. Mr. President, thank you for your kindness in allowing the debate.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the floor amendment B be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. The floor amendment is rejected. There being at least 8 hands, we will have a recorded vote. Question is, shall floor amendment B be adopted? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed? Okay. We have to take a quick break. Technical glitch, sorry. Okay, all good? All right. System's back up. Right, so we will now have a recorded vote regarding floor amendment B. All those in favor of agreeing to the floor amendment will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 15, noes 21.
Ayes 15, noes 21. The Senate does not adopt floor amendment B.
We have a floor amendment to
1 second, I think. We have to check the system again.
You okay? We have another floor amendment to the floor substitute by Senator Ruff.
Senator from Mecklenburg, Senator Ruff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we waive the reading of the amendment.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor amendment be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendment is waived. Senator from Mecklenburg, Senator Ruff.
Mr. President, speaking to the amendment, earlier this month, the director of the Department of Elections announced that he would not do the required national change of address match until after the November election. What this amendment does is require the department to run that change of address match before mailing out any absentee ballots. I see no logic in wasting the postage to mail to excuse me, to mail to folks who have been moved out of the state. It is a waste of the taxpayers' money. Additionally, it gives greater opportunity to voter fraud. Additionally, do we really want first-class mail to be forwarded out of state, potentially allowing people to vote in 2 states? I ask you to approve the amendment.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose, Senator from James City County, Senator Norman rise.
Would the gentleman from Mecklenburg yield for a question?
Senator Yield.
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Mr. President, my question to the gentleman is, as I read this, it provides for certification to the chairman of the House and Senate committees on privileges and elections. My question, sir, is why are we including those committees in there when they've been divested of ownership and review of this bill?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would respond that policy belongs before P&E, and that is where it should remain.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor amendment? Seeing none, the question is, shall
Mr. President?
Senator from Alexandria, Senator Abbott.
Yeah, would the senator from Mecklenburg yield for a question?
Senator Yield.
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Has he spoken to anyone at the Department of Elections to find out if it's possible at this date now to get this done before September 18th when the ballots must be put in the mail?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I have not done it, but it is a computer match. It could be done overnight. The next day, someone in the office could relay that to each registrar, the 138 registrars in the state of Virginia.
And would he yield
Further
for another question?
Senator Yield. Senator from Mecklenburg, Senator Ruff, do you yield?
I yield.
Yields. You have the floor.
The senator mentioned the cost of first class mailing the ballots to people who may have moved, but do they not put their current address on the application when they apply for it?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question correctly, but if we mail to every registered voter, that mail will go to an address. If that person has moved, the mail will be forwarded to that address, to wherever they're living, whatever state they may be in now.
Speaking to the amendment at the appropriate time.
Now would be the time. Senator has the floor.
I would ask the members to vote against the amendment without assurances from the Department of Elections that this can be conducted. I don't know why it was postponed, but I'm concerned that September 18th is the date that ballots are under the Code of Virginia to be mailed out for people who've applied for them. And this would change that date, possibly delaying the sending of the ballots. Further, when I applied for my absentee ballot last month, I had to indicate my address where it was to be mailed to. So I don't see a problem with it going to the wrong place. And with that, I ask that we not change it at this late date so that we vote no on the amendment.
For what purpose is the Junior Senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would the senator from Alexandria yield for a question?
Senator Yield.
Yes, I yield.
Thank
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
I would ask the senator, has he spoken to any registrar in the Commonwealth or any member of the Department of Elections that has indicated that this cannot be done in a timely fashion so as to avoid a delay in sending out the ballots?
I have not, because this
Senator's
amendment, in answer, I'd say I have not, because I had not been aware of this situation, nor had been aware of this amendment until it appeared on my desk a few minutes ago. So I did not talk to registrars about whether or not it could be completed. I'm concerned that if it's not completed, that it could delay the sending of the ballots on September 18th. And the way this amendment is written, it says that you cannot have these activities take place. And I think absentee balloting has to begin on September 18th. I'd say that's more important.
Mr. President?
Further question?
A question of the body. Can any member in the body explain to me whether or not this amendment will cause a delay in sending out the ballots once the respective registrars have received the application for an absentee ballot?
Does any member wish to answer that question?
Mr. Chair.
The senior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan.
Mr. Chair, I can take a stab at that.
Senator's the floor.
Mr. Chairman, it is my understanding that we are currently in the 90-day blackout period under the Help America Vote Act, and that the match won't happen right now. So as I read the amendment, if the Department of Elections has to complete the voter list maintenance program prior to doing anything required by this act, and the Help America Vote Act has us in a 90-day blackout period where that match can't occur, then the way I read this amendment, this would prevent any of the activities required pursuant to this act from occurring.
Mr. President, would the gentlelady from Richmond yield for a question?
Senator Yield.
Yes.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Could the senator tell me why the Department of Elections shall not be required to complete this voter list maintenance program as required by statute, irrespective of how many hours they have to work late to get the job done?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, again, I would say my understanding is there is a 90-day blackout period under the Federal Help America Vote Act that prohibits the matching program from occurring within 90 days of a federal election. So the Department of Elections would not be able to complete the match program under the federal act.
Further question?
I thank the senator. Would the Senator Ruff yield for a question?
Senator Yield.
I yield.
Senator Yield, you have the floor.
Senator Ruff, I would preface my question to you with this. The amendment that you have, the substitute, on its face appears very reasonable, that the Department of Election do what the statute requires them to do. Senator McClellan says that there is a 90-day lockout period. We are within 70 days of an election. Therefore, it is impossible, as I understand Senator McClellan's response, to do what is otherwise a pretty legitimate ask. Can you address Senator McClellan's point that we are past the lockout period of 90 days?
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I would respond that I do not know that particular section of the federal law. If there is a 90-day lockout, I find it interesting that the director of the Department of Elections did not notify the registrars around the state until September the 7th, which would have been after that date. so that I'm not sure that what his thinking was, but it is required by law that that be done.
Speaking briefly to the amendment, Mr.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you. Mr. President, I accept my colleague and fellow senator from Richmond's pronouncement that we're past the lockout period. I accept that, and therefore this amendment is not practical. With that said, I'd like to know why the Department of Elections didn't do what the law required them to do. Why weren't they conversant with federal law so that they complied within the timely period? Are they that overworked at the Department of Elections that they could not have completed their duties, their responsibilities in a timely fashion?
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose, the Senator from Alexandria, Senator Eben rise?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I overheard the senator from Richmond City speaking, and I think she's correct. I was on the phone with the Department of Elections in the back there. It is true, she was correct. Federal law does have a lockout period of 90 days before the election for completing the annual voter list maintenance. I can't answer to junior senator from Richmond as to when that'll be done, if it's at what month after the election or what the annual calendar is, but I'm sure they'd be happy to assist him if he wants to inquire of them.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding the floor amendment? Seeing none, the question is, shall the floor amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The floor amendment is rejected. Now, seeing at least 8 hands, we will have a recorded vote. Question is, shall the floor amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 15, noes 21.
Ayes 15, noes 21. The floor amendment fails. The senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe. To engross in advance.
I move that we engross in advance the bill to its third reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall Senate Bill 5120 be engrossed in advance to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed in advance to its third reading.
Uncontested calendar, Senate bill on first reading. Senate Bill 5109, a bill relating to Commissioner of Health, nursing home employees and residents priority for testing COVID-19 pandemic. Commending resolutions.
You want to go back to the one?
Oh, he's here.
Okay. Commendings, okay.
Commending resolutions.
Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslaw.
Mr. President, I move that the commending resolutions on page 11, that's Senate Resolution 521 through 527, be considered in a block by voice vote, waiving the reading of the resolutions with the understanding that any senator desiring to remove a resolution from the block will do so after the clerk has read the number of the resolution.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the commending resolutions on page 11, Senate Resolution 521 through Senate Resolution 527, be considered in the block by voice vote, waiving the reading of the resolutions with the understanding that any senator desiring a resolution be removed from the block will do so after the clerk has read the number of the resolution. All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The resolutions are before us in the block. The clerk will read the numbers of the resolutions.
Senate resolutions 521, 526, 527.
Question is, shall the resolutions be agreed to? All in favor of agreeing to the resolutions will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolutions are agreed to.
Returning to page 6, Senate Bill 5095.
Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that with the motion, Mr. President, are we entertaining the First Amendment or the second? The committee substitute.
The committee substitute first, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the recommendation that we reject the committee substitute, I move the substitute.
Thank the Senator. With the recommendation that it be rejected, the question is, shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. The committee substitute is rejected. Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now withdraw floor substitute number 1.
Without objection, floor substitute number 1 is withdrawn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that we waive the reading of floor substitute number 2.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the reading of floor substitute number 2 be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of floor substitute number 2 is waived. Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. This floor substitute really better clarifies the intent of this bill. There are rapid tests that the state is contracting to obtain. It's in a compact with other states. Those rapid tests have turnaround within 15 minutes of COVID positivity, something that would be an imperative importance for those on the front lines. Mr. President, this bill simply moves that for COVID, it specifies for the COVID-19 crises and epidemic, not for all in the Commonwealth, but for that epidemic that are essential workers. It is inclusive for all essential workers, but does prioritize those that are very much on the front lines, like firefighters, medical personnel, et cetera, et cetera. This bill just changed the language to make all of those specifications, and that is the substitute, Mr. President, and I move that we accept the substitute.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard regarding floor substitute number 2? Seeing none, the question is, shall the floor substitute be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Floor substitute number 2 is adopted. Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I now move that we engross and advance the reading to its 3rd constitutional reading, the bill to its 3rd reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its 3rd reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its 3rd reading.
Returning to page 9.
Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the substitute be agreed to.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is agreed to. Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the bill be engrossed and advanced to its 3rd constitutional reading.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its 3rd constitutional reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its 3rd constitutional reading.
Which, since mine is not blue, I didn't realize we had. Uncontested calendar, Senate bill on first reading, Senate Bill 5082, a bill relating to certain hospices, home care organizations, private providers, assisted living facilities, and adult daycare centers, immunity from civil liability, COVID-19 emergency. Regular calendar, Senate bills on first reading, Senate Bill 5067, a bill to provide immunity from civil claims related to the transmission of or exposure to the COVID-19 virus emergency. Senate Bill 5107, a bill relating to unemployment compensation, short-term compensation, sunset repeal emergency.
All right. Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Saslow. Just completing the calendar.
We did that.
Mr. President, I'd ask the choir of the clerk, does this complete the calendar for today?
That completes the calendar today.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? Senior Senator from Virginia Beach, Senator DeSteph.
Mr. President, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, the more I pull back the curtain, the more I uncover absolutely heinous cases that the parole board has decided in the midst of a state of emergency. Perhaps you're familiar with Tyson Xavier Golden. His rampage of violent home invasions and robberies culminated when he and two others broke into the home of an 87-year-old Maggie Spinner and her brother Larry White, robbing them and pistol whipping the 91-year-old man to death. This brutal and violent blows to the head produced multiple fractures to his skull, killing Mr. White. Again, killing Mr. White. Mr. President, I cannot believe that a jury who sentences a man to 3 life terms plus 118 years ever intended that the individual to be released from prison. I ask you, Mr. President, exactly how many life terms does it take to ensure that a violent, dangerous, cold-blooded killer stays in prison? Clearly, 3 plus 118 years is not enough. It appears from the review of the parole board records that Mr. Golden was never previously considered for parole, which also seems highly unusual, since the decision to release the 55-year-old Golden was made in January. It's clearly neither a geriatric release nor based on the COVID pandemic. However, on April 3rd, Mr. Golden strolled right out of prison after serving only 33 years from a term of 3 life sentences and 118 years. As reported by the Roanoke Times, the Roanoke Commonwealth Attorney's Office said it was never notified, a communication that's required by law. But as we've recently and already established in numerous other cases, this law is seldom followed. Why? At least not when it matters most. So who's accountable? Now, Mr. President, I know that the senator from Eastern Fairfax County will say, hey, none of these bills we're doing now will change anything on these people who have been released. And you know what? He's absolutely right, Mr. President. What these bills will do, however, is release another 10, 20, or 30,000 of these murderers, rapists, and cold-blooded killers back into our neighborhoods. Maybe not his, but into our neighborhoods. Mr. President, I fully intend to continue shining a bright light on these incredibly reckless actions of the parole board, the administration, and the governor. These actions which jeopardize the safety of Virginians and undermined our system of justice across the Commonwealth. I have 3 questions, Mr. President. What about the victims? Who's going to look out for the victims? And if 3 life sentences plus 118 years is not enough to keep someone in prison, what is? What do we have to do to keep someone in prison? Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? For what purpose is the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator Morrissey, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for the point of personal privilege, please.
Senators, the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of this body, something occurred within the last half hour that should be troubling to all of us. Senator Ruff introduced an amendment that I voted against because I accepted, and it was correct, Senator Evans and Senator McClellan's point that we were outside the time frame, and they were absolutely right. So then that begs the question, why did not the Department of Elections follow up their duties and responsibilities pursuant to Section 24.2/428? And it's clear that they did not. The director, Mr. Piper, sent out an email to one of my colleagues, and it said, "We are not doing this maintenance mailing until after the election. We simply cannot work it in the schedule." Really? Really, folks? We pass a law, Section 24.2/428, that requires the Department of Elections to do certain things pursuant to federal law. They don't do it, and they come back and they say, quote, "We simply could not work it in the schedule." Really, Mr. Piper? Really? Folks, if we are the body that passes laws and it becomes incumbent on the State Board of Elections to do what we say, or any other state agency, and they don't do it, and we're going to allow them simply to say, "Sorry, mate, didn't have time to get to it." That is the height of irresponsibility. I know that my friend and colleague, the chairman of the Senate Privileges and Elections, will look into this. But folks, that should bother everybody in this body to their core, that some state agency could get away with it. And folks, that's what I'm talking about, possible mischief. Now, right now, that State Board of Elections, I believe, is controlled by the Ds. It's going to be controlled by the Rs someday, and then back to the Ds. They can't be acting this way. They can't do what they want to do on their own schedule. They've got to, imagine this, follow the law. So I hope that Mr. Piper and company are brought before Senate P&E and explain why they said, "We can't do it by the election. We simply cannot work it into our schedule." Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, Senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Rise for point of personal privilege.
Senator, is the floor.
I did not have all the dots connected on that email until I just heard the junior senator from Richmond speak. But I will point out, Mr. President, this is the same body who today, as we moved that bill on to third reading, we have entrusted to ensure the ballot boxes are safe. Now, I don't know about you, but I've seen regulations promulgated in Virginia before. It doesn't happen before September 18th. Now, maybe they're already written. Maybe this was all scripted and this was all done ahead of time. But it is our responsibility to ensure that elections are safe. It is our responsibility to direct how that safety can be implemented, and it is our responsibility to hold agencies accountable if it's not done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. What purpose does the senior senator from Chesterfield, Senator Chase, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for the point of a personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I rise today to encourage Virginians, where possible, vote in person. As you have seen today, the outcome of today's vote is that our elections are going to be less secure. Random boxes throughout our communities that are going to be rampant with fraud. I'm encouraging every person every Virginian that wants their vote to count, to vote in person, and you can do so 45 days in advance of the election. You can vote in person at your local registrar's office. I'm very disappointed about today's vote. I think we've let the voters of Virginia down. I do not think this is a good idea. We have made this process less secure, and we need to do everything we can to make our votes count and vote in person. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. Do any other senators wish to be recognized? Is there any other business to come before the Senate? Seeing none, the clerk will report. Senior Senator from Clerk will report any announcements on the desk.
Committee on General Laws and Technology will meet 15 minutes after adjournment. This is a virtual meeting. The plans for next week are that Monday will be a pro forma session. Tuesday, there will be no session, and then we will be in session Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Senior Senator from Fairfax, Senator Sasslaw.
Mr. President, just a couple of announcements. Commerce and Labor has one bill left, but it's currently in negotiation with all the constituency groups involved. Hopefully it'll be done today. The substitute will be reprinted, and we will meet tomorrow immediately upon adjournment. And you'll hear when we're coming in tomorrow from the President Pro Tem. That'll take care of that. The other is that for future planning, and obviously things can change at the last second, but what we're planning on doing is we're going to be in Richmond until this whole thing is over. Until the whole thing is over, we'll be in Richmond on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Okay? And so maybe that'll help you all plan. Those of you who have work schedules, plan on being here Wednesday, Thursdays, and Fridays until we totally finish. After, I said Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Thanksgiving's on a Thursday, but we're still here.
You eat your turkey here, okay? I got a feeling you won't be the only turkey. All right. I'm only kidding. Anyway, so that's what the current schedule is.
For purposes of the Senator from James City County, Senator Norman rise.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank the Majority Leader and Madam Clerk for finally being able to put together a schedule that is very, very helpful to all of us. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank the Senator. Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, calling the Senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Thank the Senator. Question is, shall the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.